Good evening all. So we'll be starting the webinar in another 1 minute. Hi all, good evening. I welcome you all to this webinar. And to begin with, sorry for there was some technical issue. So good evening once again. So I welcome you all to this webinar. And to begin with, I would like to take this opportunity to thank our co-founders, Mr. Arun Prakash sir, Mr. Balamurgan sir, and Mrs. Sridevi ma'am, for giving me this opportunity to conduct this webinar. So today we have with us Mr. S.S. Sashikiran, who is a product designer at IIM Raipur, and he's going to take us through the topic how you can understand about the fundamentals of UI and UX and also the product flows. So I do hope that this webinar is going to be very beneficial for all the UI UX aspirant as well as for beginners like me who's very curious to know about UI UX. So yes, I hand over the session to Mr. Sashikiran sir. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for your great introduction about me. So yeah, let me share my screen and let's get started. So is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So welcome you all to this session. And we're going to talk about the fundamentals of UI, UX and product journey and all. So yeah, so the first question and the first terminology which we see here is design. So what do you think must be design? Like I'll just give you some 10 seconds for you to think about what is design, because when I say design, like there are multiple things which might come to your mind, and there are lots and lots of things about design, right? So yeah, so what do you think is design? Just take some 10 seconds to just think about what. Okay. So I guess when you hear of this, the term design, like there is the first thing which comes to your mind is the aesthetics aspects, correct? Like apart from that, might be few might think about the diagrams which come to their mind, or the maps or the journeys when the term design is spelled, correct? Yeah. So now let's see what design is. So according to me, from my perspective, I see design as a combination of something which solves a problem, which deals with art and psychology. What do I mean by these three terms? Problem, art, psychology. The first terminology is problem, because problem is something which any design can be a design only when it solves a particular problem. It cannot be a kind of it cannot be really called a design in case if it is not solving any problem, or if it is not any it doesn't have any purpose in dealing with it, right? So yeah, so a good design must solve a particular problem. And when it comes to art, art is all about the visual elements, the aesthetics, the look and feel, and all these things. So, any good design would definitely solve a particular problem. Will have an art oriented towards it. Yeah. So apart from this, there is something called as psychology, which is another element of design, which I would say. So psychology deals with the way in which the user can really grab that particular content, or the way in which they behave as a kind of what to say, when they go to a society, or when they go with multiple people, and when they start behaving, like what are the ways in which they start behaving, and what are the things which are essential for that particular user to have registered in his mind or something. So design is a combination of three dimensions, which I would say: uh, problem, art, and psychology. So does this seem good? Is this fine? Yeah. I hope this would be a kind of a convincing statement. Let's go to the next slide. So assume that you are given a kind of task, like to say, like, go to your grandfather and give him some water. What is the container which you will be choosing in order to take water to your grandfather? So that is a little confusing, right? So how will you really go on with the decision of choosing what kind of container you will be picking in order to take water to your grandfather, or whoever may be? So when you start thinking about this, there are lots of dimensions which are involved in this particular scenario. So just think about it. For example, when you're going to give him a glass of water, the first thing is something which we need to talk about that particular water, because what is the quantity of water that you're going to take? That is first thing. Second thing, you as a kid have to be comfortable with picking that particular container or something, and taking through a long distance without getting the water spilled down, and deliver it rightly to your grandfather. The third aspect, think about the user. Like, what kind of vessel will he really like in order to have that particular water uh, taken for him? What will be the most comfortable container on this? So just correlate the concept of designs with this particular example. So we were talking about problem, right? So the problem is, in this particular case, is nothing but taking water from one particular location to another particular location, and delivering it to that particular user, correct? So in this case, the person who is going to transfer that particular water, that is you, and you are solving that particular problem. So you need the right container, and you will be delivering it. Okay, so that really solves that particular problem of taking that particular water or bottle to the particular person. The next thing is the user's comfort, which is also related to that particular problem. So users should not have should be more comfortable, and all these things comes under the big term called as problem. So now think about the second terminology, which is art. Okay, so art is something which deals with the visual design and the visual appearance. So sometimes just imagine a situation like you are given a what is it, a very valuable product, but if it doesn't looks really good, Will you be really choosing it? For example, I'm giving you a kind of one kg of gold, but I'm just wrapping it with some kind of thermocol and some kind of paste paper, and I'm putting some kind of garbage things on over it, and I'm giving it to you. Will you really take it? No, right? So the aspect of art or the aspect of visual design or the aspect of aesthetics is also very important for a particular design. So that becomes the second dimension in which you need to see this. Okay. The third dimension is the psychological aspect. I mean, though it is not very much applicable to this particular example, still, like what will make that particular person to really talk more about that product, feel happy, and so there are some more reasons. Like for example, that particular grandfather might consider some vessel to be his lucky vessel, or some vessel to have been being gifted by some favorite person of him. So there is a psychological aspect also oriented, which has to be added when solving a problem. Okay. So have these three things in mind, and that will help you to design the products in a very better way. So let's go on to the next. So what do you think is user experience? Like, because um, we talked about design, the broad term, which is that, which is the big umbrella, which umbrella term below which we talk about UX, UI, and all these things. So what do you think is UX? Just take some 10 seconds to just think about what is UX. Okay. So I think in your mind there are lots of things which are running. For example, I think this particular example of having this push pull label on a particular glass door would have struck your mind. Or when it comes to user experience, you would have thought about more than the visual design, like how good that particular experience has to be in order to create a kind of happiness for the user and all these things, right? Yeah, that's correct. So user experience, I mean, apart from this particular so-called as an art, whether this particular I mean, whether the experience of which the user is having while interacting with that particular design is going to be good, and whether the problem is being solved in a very simpler fashion rather than making it more complex, right? For example, you would have seen the pathways in parks and all these things where the pathways are constructed in triangles or sorry, rectangles or squares or something like that. But in case if the pathway goes diagonal, the distance travel will be shorter, whereas the path which you take is in a straight line and will be more easier, like to travel between 2 points, rather than taking a kind of a right angled path. Just imagine like traveling on the hypotenuse of that particular triangle. It will make you travel quicker, and the path will be more simpler, right? So user experience is all about giving a positive experience when the user, when the user is going to experience a particular design or something. Okay, let's take the example of this particular flask. Just think a bit. Do you think this flask is very is of good design? Just take some 10 seconds to think about this particular flask. Does it look good? Is it attractive? Yes, right? It is attractive actually, right? It looks good, right? The colors used, the red, the shape might be, it's having lots of curves, because in UI design, like we know that giving a border radius or giving a curve will always enhance the look and feel of that particular design, right? So similarly, here in this flask also has lots of curves and it really looks good. The colors are good. The UI is actually really looking good. But on the other hand, just think about the user experience. Will a person handling this flask really have a good user experience? Just think about it. No, right? Because see, think about the handle's position. Will you be able to lift a particular jar when the handle is at the bottom of the particular jar? So according to physics and all these things, like the weight of that particular whole product lies at the bottom, right? So you are actually lifting the whole weight, which will make it still difficult, right? So Don't you think that's a drawback? Apart from that, think about the what is it, the pipe where the steam comes out. So will you be able to handle that particular flask by having by holding it at the bottom and having the steam directly going to your face? Do you think that will be a good user experience? No, right? Yeah. So though the design or the visual elements might look really great in this particular design, visually this particular flask may really seem to be great, but on the other hand, the user experience will not be delivered properly in this particular flask. Getting my point? Apart from that, if you really think deeper, like the flask doesn't really have an inlet inlet to pour the water, you will have to pour the water only through that particular outlet. And when you think of cleaning this particular flask, it's going to be terribly difficult. There are lots and lots of problems in this particular flask. So this concept was said by a famous designer and philosophist and a person called Don Norman, and he has written a famous book called The Design of Everyday Things, which is actually considered to be the Bible or kind of word of source of truth of UI UX designers and all these things. So I think I always recommend my students to just, even though if you don't have time to read and all these things, just grab and buy this particular book, so that whenever you get free time, like whenever you have, I mean, whenever you have some 5 or 10 minutes time in your life, just you can just start reading this book, and you'll really, I mean, your dimensions towards design and all these things was really enlarged and diverge when you start thinking about this. Okay. So I repeat, the book name is The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman, and this particular flask is called as the Don Norman flask, and this is one of the classic example which is said whenever the word user experience is uttered. Okay. Yeah. So let's move on to the next. So what do you think about this particular cake? Just think about, like, as a user, like, okay, assume that it is your birthday party, and I am coming up with a cake like this, and I'm just presenting it to you. Like, how will you really feel? Happy? I understand that your mind voice is thinking about it depends on user's taste, whether he likes chocolate or not, and all these things. I know as designers, like your thinking will definitely go in that direction, because you start, so from the previous example, you had already started thinking about the users, and now you know that the designs have to be made exactly towards the specifications and exactly as per the user requirements. Correct? Yeah. So of course, the chocolates. I mean, it's the user preference, like the birthday person's. I mean, he must have a liking towards the chocolates, and only then he will really like it. But on the other hand, just think about the situation. Like, if this cake was used for a party or a birthday party like that, assume. I mean, just think about, like, how will be the experience if I have some kind of candles on this? Because in a birthday party celebration, we will really have the candles. Like, we cannot really place a candle in this particular cake, right? So how will you really cut this cake? You cannot use a knife and you cannot go and do the cutting, right? So think about the user experience. Like, will it be hampered? Like, apart from this, like, when you start unpacking the particular chocolates, what if everything starts melting and flowing down or falling down? Or at the worst scenario, just think, why did your brain really go on to think that this is a cake? This is not even a cake. Why can't it this be a kind of a fancy cake made up of thermocol or paper or something like that, right? So as designers, what I always tell in my classes to my students is, so whenever you think of the word design, don't just confine your brains and have a limited thinking. Just allow it to flow, and your way of thinking should really change. And I mean, your thought process should not really have restrictions or confinements towards particular things. So yeah. Let's move on to the next. So yes, so let's think about the two remotes which are seen on this particular screen. The one on the left side is some kind of classical remote which most of the TVs had previously before. I mean, even the TVs today have this, but still, this is still seen as a kind of an old-fashioned remote. Whereas think of the remote on the right side. It just seems to be like a kind of a modern day smart TV remote and with minimalistic design, right? So just think, like, what do you think is a better design? Just think. What do you think is a better design of these two? I guess most of you had gone with the option on the right, correct? Because we as designers get fascinated by the terminologies like minimalism. What else? Like having less feature, less buttons and more functions and all these things. But yeah, but still, what I would say from my perspective is that there is nothing so called as the best design. It is all about the users usage and the perspective. So the first question which you really need to ask as a designer is to what audience am I catering to? Okay. In case if you're catering for a kind of an old age people audience, I mean, if your target audience is something related to some old people or people who really want to have the buttons, want to touch and really press the button. So to that user, you will really have to give the remote on the left side rather than going for the right side remote. Because if you give a kind of a remote to a right side remote to a kind of an older person who is not really familiar with the smart TVs and all these things, on the other hand, who's really used to these calculators or using the mobile phones with buttons or the keyboards and all these things, these people will really expect the numbers or they will really expect the kind of icon usage. They will expect, I mean, everything to be available before them in a quick span. They want to really see that and then they want to really operate that because they are really used to that behavior and they obviously go on for that kind of feature. Okay. So you need to go on for the remote like that of the left in case if you're designing for an old age person or for kind of a blind person or I mean blind person cannot see a TV but still some kind of color blind people or I mean you really have to understand the disability and then design for the target audience. On the other hand, if you're going for youth who really are used to the technologies and all these things, you can go for the right side remote. The biggest difference is that the right side remote like is actually a better design in the market because user need not really see onto a remote and when the user sees on the remote the on-screen time reduces actually because he will have to really see on the remote and then click on the button correct button. On the other hand, if you use a remote on the right side, you really need not see that particular remote interface. You know the buttons because there are only few buttons there. You know the volume up down. You know how to change the channels and all these things. So you can directly go on to see the interface of the television and you can operate the television directly. And whatever options are available there. So whenever you click on a particular button, you get the visual reaction at that particular interface and you are able to really decide upon whether to click down or up or side or left even without even arrow button indicator on the circular. So yeah, so it depends. So it's always based upon the audience to whom you are really catering that particular to. So think about it. So now let's think about yeah. So this is a takeaway one. So design for the audience, and it's not about designing something fancy or designing some kind of solution without even understanding who the user base is going to be. So always design for the audience, understand the audience, and then decide like what you're really going to do with this. Fine. So let's talk next about a classic case which is called as the Kenya water roller case. Like we used to see in the, I mean, if you go to any slums or villages, like initially before, not the recent ones, before few decades, like people used to carry water from the wells or lakes, whatever it may be, like from any water bodies to their place with the help of some big drums or buckets or whatever it is, like pots, whatever it is, right? So similarly, the people of Kenya were really suffering from a very serious drought, and they were not able to get water from their wells. They will have to walk for about 5 to 10 kilometers to get that one bucket of water. So this was a scenario which was prevailing in Kenya for a longer period, and the people were really finding it difficult. On the other hand, so just like how we Indians, like we think about, in case if we're having these kind of problems, we shout at the politicians and ask them to lay big pipelines and all these things and have big motors and bring the water to their particular villages or whatever area or whatever may be. Okay, so that's something which we do. But on the other hand, the Kenya people didn't have that much financial resources, or they didn't have that particular capability to lay big pipelines and bring those particular bring the water facility to that areas, because that really, yeah, I mean, people have to really spend a lot for it, and they really don't have it. So what do you think would have been a situation for this particular case? Because as designers, like even most people, like in case of if they are asked to find a solution for this, the engineers will come up with a solution of laying big pipelines and having motors in order to bring the water from distance. This is what engineers are going to suggest. In case if bore is not working, engineers are definitely going to suggest a kind of big pipelines, and that is how their mindset really goes, right? So, but on the other hand, the kids were just playing with the drums, and they, so when the kids started trying to bring water, like a string was tied to the drums, and water was, after water was filled, it was closed, and with the help of this string, the kids were even able to pull it long to pull it easily to longer distances. So when some designer or some logical mind who saw this particular design, like he got impressed by the way in which this was operating, and so that becomes a classic way in which the water roller was created. So do you want to see the water roller, how it was created? Because now you are able to see like how the kids are pulling the water tanks to their locations, right? So now just think about enhancing this particular water trolley or water wheel, whatever it is. So if you think of enhancing this water wheel, you can make something like this and make their process very easier. You can have a wheel which really rotates and have the drum in the center of it, and when they bring water to their place, they can easily come up with their roller in which the water is being filled. So assume, so this is how a designer has to think. It's not always the need for higher money or higher resources to do or achieve a particular task. You can always achieve certain things at an economic level also. And that, I mean, this case, this is something which is classic for that. I mean, this is a classic example for that particular. Agree with me? So the takeaway number 2 is solution is not always costly. You can also think and make it very simpler and make it in a cost effective manner also. Agree? Yeah. So let's move on to the next case, which is the classic Netflix case. So what did Netflix really come up with this black and red color? Any idea behind this? Just think, like, why did Netflix choose red and black? Okay. So the reason was US had theaters like this. So most of the seats and the aesthetics of the theaters which are there in the America had this kind of setup, where the predominant colors used were red and black. So Netflix as a brand wanted to bring in the same experience to the users, and that's the reason for choosing those colors and bringing them to their application also. That's fine. Now the next question is, why did Netflix have this kind of carousel moment, or having the what to say, the thumbnails of or the banners of the movies or arranged in a particular, because think like you can arrange these things in a fancy manner also, right? You can arrange these images or movies like in a kind of a diamond way, or in a kind of some kind of different stylish circular way or something like that. What is the reason for arranging in linear fashion horizontally, like a kind of a rail, or they call it as a carousel at sometimes? So what do you think must have been the reason why they arranged in this way? Any idea? Able to think something? Okay, yeah. So let me tell. It's all based upon the experiences which users have in their past. So for example, consider a bookshelf. So if you go to the what to say, any bookstores, the books are arranged in that particular linear fashion, and people are used to scrolling the books in a linear fashion. Like they go to each shelf, they scroll through what are the books which are really available on that particular thing. The cover is being scanned, and users really see those covers, right? So it has become a behavior for humans for the long run, like how they go to a library and just scan through the names of the books which they see. Similarly, after this, even the CD stores, like the DVD stores, were something which was uh, which were everywhere before the coming of the OTT platforms like Netflix, Amazon, and Hotstar. Um, so before the coming of OTT, like people were really used to go to the DVD stores. They scan the bookshelves, or sorry, they scan the CD or DVD shelves in a linear fashion. They go from one particular product to the next product, and they really see what kind of movie it is, who acts it. I mean, they just scroll in that way, right? So that experience have to be replicated in an interface, and that's the reason why this particular carousel format or a rail structure where the banners are placed together in a horizontal fashion, and users can easily feel scrolling one by one. So the experience which happened offline is being just replicated, and the designs were created in this. You getting my point? So yeah. So similarly, this is how the designs happen, because any product in this world is because of the past experiences of the human race. And if human race didn't have a kind of a past experience, he will directly think about how the nature has solved it, because God is the biggest designer, and there cannot be any other better designer than God. We really copy the designs from what is existing and what happened in the past. For example, if you take the aeroplanes, maybe the aerodynamics were understood, like how the birds were able to fly, and only those were incorporated, and the aeroplane was successfully made. So what would be the invention? Like any design comes from the nature or from past experience. Even if you think of today's machine learning algorithms, or see how the way in which CPU processes, is something which what our brain really does. We are just replicating what this God has created in this world and making them as better design. Getting my point? Yeah. So takeaway third three is nothing but evolution with unstoppable. Like there's nothing called as the best design. Like the design keeps on evolving. Like initially it was 3D stores, then it becomes into Netflix OTT. Though the experience is constant, the evolution keeps happening, and we really benchmark the previous designs which were created in the past, or we benchmark the designs created by God, and we start creating products. So that's how every product is being made. So I hope now you're pretty clear about what is the difference between UX and UI, because as we talked initially, UI is all about the art, the aesthetics, the look and feel, the colors, the graphics, the layouts, typography, the iconography, and all these things. So UI is all about the interface, how it really looks, what kind of coloring it really has, Like, is it really looking pleasing or amazing? So that's all about UI. On the other hand, UX is all about the experience, or the way in which the user really interacts. So it's all about the way in which the wireframes are created. It's all about the way in which a user really uses that particular product. So a more research on user behavior, the way in which the product is designed, and all these things have to be done when it comes to user experience. So user experience and user interface are, these terminologies are used in this particular design area, and they're a little different. And I hope you have understood the fundamentals of UI UX. So in the long courses, like, we'll be talking more about the frameworks like design thinking framework, which talks more about what to say, how to yeah how to so design thinking framework is one of the most important framework which we really use in order to come up with better products. And so for in this particular process, like, in this particular framework, we use 5 steps to understand what who the users are, how the research has to be done, and how the prototype is created, how it is being tested and converted into a kind of a design. This is a kind of a repeated process which keeps on happening. And so how it starts from the phase called design phase, where in define phase, like, it starts from define phase. So in the define phase, like, you really figure out what the problem is, the generalistic problem node, or like what is the scenario behind this, like how it is being structured and all these things. You understand that particular problem and you really define it. And so after this comes the empathize phase. In the empathize phase, you'll be really understanding who your users are. You'll be going to your users, understanding you'll understand them, like how they are working, and like what kind of product they really want. So in this particular area, you will go on with the user research. You will go on for surveys, questionnaires, focus groups, whatever it is. Like, you will go for detailed understanding about the user, and post which you will start to ideate and think about what are the ways in which this particular problem or the particular user can be solved. Because in the research phase, like, you understood what are the pain points, needs of the particular user. So based on that, you can really ideate, generate the ideas, and think about how they want to really solve that particular problem. Okay. So once you generate the ideas, once you start thinking in a diverse manner, and at a point you will confine yourself to having a solution. This solution really matters about solving all the important problems and fixing the needs, right? So the solution will be found, and once the solution is found, you will then make it as a prototype. So creating a prototype is nothing but going for the wireframing, designing, and then creating the interactive design between the flow in which the screens are structured, so that or in case if it is a screen, in case if it is a software application, it is about the screen flow and all these things. When it comes to a real-time project, it's about a miniature design which can really work in the same way in which the final product will work. So that can be really tested upon and understood what are the drawbacks which are there in this particular design, and whether it's a good design or not. So that user testing will again be done. The product will be tested. In case if it is not really satisfactory, again you go on for defining what the problem is. Again, you will emphasize and understand the users. You will keep on ideating, and you'll be enhancing the solution, until there is a kind of a product market fit, until the users are really satisfied with that particular product which you really have designed and tested. So that's all about the design thinking framework, which most people use in the design industry. So this is all about, I'm just telling things in a nutshell so that you understand the fundamentals of design. And the next, thinking about the double diamond approach. So there is one more framework which IBM really uses, called as double diamond approach. So double diamond approach was something which was derived from how we really think as users, because when you are given a kind of a scenario and you are asked to take a decision, you obviously think about you think all the different ways in which initially at the initial stages you understand like what are the ways in which this particular problem can was created, and you understand all the ways reasons why this problem was created. So at a point you will decide what are the key issues which when solved will really solve the entire problem and all these things. So you understand all the key things and you define the problem perfectly. Okay. So you kind of create a kind of a problem definition after analyzing what are all the ways, what are all the reasons why this problem was created, and after understanding all these things, you come up to a particular point where you define the particular problem, and then at the next stage you start you start thinking again in a diverse manner, like what are the different possibilities I can really solve this particular problem. So you will go on for a thinking again, the diverse thinking. The ideas will flow out. There will be lots of ways to really solve this particular problem. And at a particular point, again, you will just converge and think about what are the problems which what is the best right way in which I should really solve this particular problem, so that it becomes easy for the users and all the real problems are being solved. So that is the converging part, coming up to a solution and deciding what is the solution. And again, so this is how our brain thinks also. And this particular framework is called as double diamond approach, where you discover again in this, even in the same process, you'll be discovering, you'll be then defining what the problems are. Then you will then develop a right product which can be done, and finally you deliver the design with all the required features and all these. So yeah, this is double diamond approach. And just I have just given a kind of a glimpse of what this particular double diamond approach is. My next thinking about the user research. Yeah, so there are two different ways in which users do research. One is the qualitative and the other is quantitative. So qualitative, so whenever you are getting, you are doing a kind of a research in terms of textual words or in terms of emotions and all these things, it is qualitative because you go to people, you speak to them, you have interviews, you have focus groups. You think about like what is the background of that particular people, which is something related to ethnography, like what kind of cultural background which they really have. And so all these things are kind of qualitative research where you understand the emotions, you understand the answers to your questions in terms of descriptions rather than in terms of numbers. So that is qualitative. Versus the quantitative research, which talks more about the numbers, which exactly says that this percentage of the people like this, these many people gave this much star rating. So when you talk in terms of numbers, there's kind of quantitative research, and this can be done using surveys, secondary data observation, experimentation, and all these things. So these are two main kind of research terminologies which we really use in the design industry: the qualitative research and the quantitative research. So that's about the user research and all these things. So next comes the empathy map. Empathy map talks about like what the user thinks, feels, sees. So these kind of maps are kind of tools which designers use in order to understand particularly, because when it comes to surveys and this quantitative research, we get the exact numbers. But on the other hand, when we deal with interviews and all these things, when we do qualitative research, we do not get numbers, right? But still, we need to understand like what the user is really expecting from us. So empathy map becomes a tool for us to understand like what the user thinks, feels, says, and does. Right? So we then define what kind of user persona he is. Like a persona is nothing but just a kind of an a kind of an it's not a real character, but a kind of character, which fictional character, maybe it can be said as a fictional character, which has the characteristics of a particular segment of audience whom you're going to target. So you're just understanding the audience and creating a persona for that particular audience segment. That's about user persona. And so next, coming on to the journey map, this is something which is very crucial. This is very crucial actually, because we are understanding how the user is going to traverse through inside this particular process. Like what are the stages in which he is going to flow, and what are the touch points he is going to have with our business, and where we can really enhance this experience. Because only if you know the touch points where this particular customers will have with us, and that at that positions you can give him a better experience so that he really stays in a particular application, right? So user journey map is nothing but the way in which the user is really going to travel in order to achieve his final goal in our product or process or business, whatever it is. So understanding a journey map will help you to decide like what kind of flow can be created inside your application for so that the users can find the app more interactive and he can go on for it. Right? So journey map is very critical. Like it's all about deciding what is more priority, and I mean we can do all prioritization in this particular area. We can really understand like what kind of emotion the user is having at each stage of a process. For example, to say a good example, like as you think about you're ordering on Swiggy or Zomato. I mean, you're ordering on a food delivery application, and so there are multiple touch points, right? Like you may take a mobile, like you might have received a notification of an offer coupon. It might either be on your phone or sometimes even on some other e-commerce platform like Amazon, which gives you kind of Swiggy coupon by a promotion or something. So you have a coupon code, you can enjoy it. So you're just going inside an application and seeing what kind of products or the hotels or restaurants which are near you, and you explore like what are the food which you can try. So at that particular moment, like you need to think from a user's perspective, like what is this emotion involved, and is he really hungry, or is he expecting a kind of a tasty food or a healthy food? So those kind of questions have to be answered while listing the products which the user wants, right? So whenever you're targeting to a particular segment of audience, like you need to think from that particular segment's perspective, and you need to create a better experience. And even after ordering, after the order is being created from the application, like how the delivery person is going to come. So is the user going to see when the what is the estimated time of arrival, the ETA, and what kind of packaging you're really going to give for the customer so that he is really happy. So even after that, you again collect a kind of feedback system. You have a feedback system where you keep on reviewing the delivery person, and you can also review the restaurant or the food which you really ate, and this review is going to help the particular business in deciding whether to show the rank this particular products higher or lower. So all these things are kind of interconnected. So deciding this journey across like how the user travels and what kind of emotions he has in each and every phase will be very useful for you to decide like what kind of design you will have to make uh, to give the customer a better experience. So next will be the information architecture in general. We decide like so this is from a product's perspective rather than from a user's perspective. Information architecture is a product's perspective, like how the product is going to be built, like what are the modules which is the product is going to have, like what are the more critical features which the product should have, what are the features which are of lower priority, and all these things. So that you will decide, you will do the prioritization, you will decide what are the features have to be built for each and every module and all these things, and you will go on for building the information architecture. So then you go for the wireframing. So wireframing is nothing but a quick low fidelity wireframing, just representing like what kind of layout structure which I'm going to do, and what are the kind of what is it, the components which I'm going to have in this particular area, just to give a kind of quick understanding to the stakeholders about how this particular story or the process is going to be built. So that is about wireframing, to make it quickly happen and give a kind of a business understanding to the stakeholders. Then we then go on for the visual design. We use a lot of tools in order to decide. So that's about the wireframing process. So in this process, like after this wireframing process, we go on to create the visual design, creating a look and feel for the aesthetics for this particular design, and post which we go on for prototyping, like how each and every screens are related to each and every screen, like what kind of flow, what kind of animation should happen, like what kind of interaction should happen, micro interactions at the button level or the component level, what kind of component, what kind of styling it is going to have. So all these things will come under this prototyping phase. So once this prototyping phase is completed, then again we go on for user testing. We make use of there are ways to test, like you can use a heuristic evaluation to test, or you can go on for a kind of I mean, asking a real user to really use that particular product and see what are the pros and cons, pain points and needs, and then again debating on that, brainstorming activity. And there are lots and lots of topics which are there in this design thinking process. But just since everything cannot be said in one single session or one single hour, I mean, just consider it as a kind of fundamentals which are there while designing a product and what kind of journey a customer will be having inside this particular application. So I hope this session, I mean, though it was not more deeper into each and every terminology, each and every concept, I was able to touch between multiple concepts, and I was able to give you some kind of what to say, understanding towards how each and every process will really happen, and what are the things we'll be doing in each and every stage in order to come up with a kind of very good product design, which will be really liked by the target audience, and it goes on. So yeah, so that's it from my side. So I hope this session was a bit useful for you to understand what are the fundamentals of UI UX, why to go for UI UX, and understanding the basics, steps which are involved in this UI UX. So I hope everyone would have felt that this particular course of UI UX is going to be very interesting, and this career is also very interesting. It is going to be really cool. Like you guys are going to kind of, because designers are someone who do not think like the other people in this world. Designers are people who have really an out of box thinking, who see this world from a different lens, from a different perspective, and designers are those who really solve problems and what to say, and give solution for the target audience. So that's it from my side. So I hand over my mic to GUVI's team for the conclusion.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. It was really very interactive and very informative session where we understood all the basic concept of UI and UX. So thank you so much for taking your time and giving a webinar for all of our participants. So this brings to the end of the webinar, and also reminding all the participants that 24th of February will be the last day to submit your project. So do submit your project and be ready for the UI UX career fair as well. So thank you so much. Thank you all.
Thank you all. All the best for the career.